So I'm going to continue to react to this video and make sure that I try and give my best interpretation of what they're both saying, because one of the things that I could do incorrectly is to take one person's side over the other. So let's get into it.
The reason why they're referring to Avaris as a town is because they're saying it's not our thing. It's not good enough to be a city. It's not civilized enough to be an Egyptian city. It's just a town.
I got you. I got you. So basically, I know the geographical situation of things. So that, and I understand how if they had a virus, if the fighting starts breaking out south of there, it's starting to approach upon the territory that Amos or Kamos had occupied at that time. And so this is wonderful. So just for the record, me and my friends were trying to work this one out. And from your expert opinion, this says southern Egypt.
So I want to address the thing that is written on top here. The life story of Admiral Ames, 6 to 11. Here is, it appears Kemet is a city. And I think what is actually happening here is that basically it's proving what I was saying, where the word Kemet isn't as fixed as a lot of people want to believe that it is. And yes, I do believe that Kemet could sometimes refer to cities. I mean, I know a city that, at least in the Ptolemaic times, became, known as Kemet, and I think it was because it had maybe a much larger amount of Egyptians as well than the other ones, which tells you about the population shift that happened at that time. Now, I don't know when this writing is from, but it possibly is from the period of the Hyksos, where Avaris actually belonged to the Hyksos. So that's probably why they're referring to Hyksos as, he states, not as good as our own cities, and then calling it a town. But when we go to Kemet, of course, that's the interesting part about this.
Yeah, I would translate it because it's a weird, again, it's a weird turn of phrase, because what it literally says is there was fighting in this Egypt, the southern one, from this town. So what exactly that means, again, so I gave you my interpretation. That's my best interpretation. That doesn't mean it's absolutely the correct interpretation, because again, this is a little bit of a weird phraseology. So again,
no matter what the interpretation is, I think it seems pretty clear that the word Kemet could mean sections of Egypt as well. So this Kemet, that Kemet. Now, of course, it's something that's much more difficult to know is, why would they break it up like this in any case? Like, why don't they say, I was in this Kemet, then that Kemet, then that? Why isn't every piece of Kemet considered Kemet? Like, okay, that part is also Kemet. I went to that part that was also Kemet. Why are different sections named different names? But again, it seems pretty clear that the interpretation is Kemet can refer to all of Egypt. It can refer to parts of Egypt, and it can refer to even smaller parts of Egypt.
To say it the most literally possible, basically it says there was fighting in that or this Kemet, the southern one of those things.
So to be fair, it could also be a grammar thing where the person is saying how today we would say that part of, let's pick a place, that part of Afghanistan. And by the way, maybe the way the grammar works, it's omitted in this specific time. And we're maybe looking at it differently, but it could still mean something like that. Because of course, if if you're in another country, or if you're in a country, right, pick any country, Nigeria, India, whatever. If you're in a country and then you say, I went to this part of, you're still going to say, I went to this part of India. So that's also possible that's really, in fact, not only am I saying it's possible, I'm saying that is what they're saying.
Of this town.
Okay, I appreciate that. And you don't know how happy I am. I don't know, you can probably see my rosy cheeks, but it's not often that I get to have a discourse like this. I have been reaching out and just in order, I really think the field has more there to be brought to the community or the people and not just reserved for academia. Well, the teaching was reserved for academia, but the enjoyment of Egyptology as a whole, there's a lot more stages that sometimes rival the stages that the university present.
So even though this has nothing to do necessarily with the word Kemet, I think what he's saying is absolutely correct, which is that there needs to be an expansion so that people can have more interpretations. The more interpretations you have, the more likely you are to get to the right answer. It's just playing the averages. But I do believe that there is something to be gained by sharing the information. I mean, the fact that nowadays anybody can learn to speak the ancient Egyptian language. I mean, we might even see a recovery of the language. Obviously, it probably won't be 100% accurate than what it was in the past, but you know, there was also sloppy readers and writers in ancient Egypt as well. So that would just be going in line with language.
As far as exposing the information to people, so I really appreciate that you are down to do this. And so here's another attestation I wanted to look at, and this one comes from um, I think
This
this
is
is
from the coffin
spell
text.
189G, a coffin text. Now, this one is crazy because we have a few reconstructions made by, I think, Hurt Seth. And I just want to read, I contacted.
Okay, so this one's going to be really interesting since it's the same, uh, I guess, sentence written in different ways, which is part of what I'm saying about the writing of ancient Egypt and how you can't be too married to ideas and concepts and stuff like that. Now, of course, I'm learning, so I'm not, clearly, both of these guys are very expert at this. I can clearly tell, though, that the sentence starts with Heka because it's got the Heka symbol.
Another, my last book I published recently is called Black Like Osiris. It's on Amazon. I'll send you a copy just for the fun of it. But in working on the volume 2, I actually got this from a linguist PhD who I had look at this text, and what he said was two versions of the spell 189G of the coffin text clearly read Haka in Ek, Kemet Tepiu Ta. And that can be translated as you have ruled Egypt, which are on the earth.
So this is my best interpretation of this. So it's going to be Heka, which means magic, but with that bird, it becomes priest. So this is where they get the U from. Ankh, and then which is to you. Then Kemet, you can see there that sort of bank looking thing. Kemet, Tepi, which means first, Ta, Tepi Utah. The bird is a W, which is a U. Tepi Utah. So it means priestly you, Egypt or Egyptians, first on land. There was not enough space for the bird, by the way. That's why it's on the side. But obviously, this is this interpretation that I just gave you is strictly if you just go word by word by word. But if you translate it to make sense, this is one of the interpretations you get, as he says.
Kemet Tepiu Ta. And that can be translated as you have ruled Egypt, which are on the earth.
So the exact translation, as he is pointing out there, is not as important as the plurality of it. So let's just translate it in one way. You have ruled Egypt, who are on earth, which is that tepi, which means first, best. It can also mean standing on top of, and it can mean many other things. So that's how he gets to you have ruled Egypt on earth. By the way, there's a reason why he says you can interpret it that way, because there's definitely other interpretations from here, because you can certainly get uh you have ruled the Egyptians the first on earth, rather than you have ruled the Egyptians who are on earth. Now, what's interesting is that there's multiple interpretations here, and if I were to break them down, I would get sort of different uh translations. Now, of course, if you notice, there's scratches indicating that there's letters missing in the other one, which makes it very difficult to guess from the others what it could mean. Now you can see some of the letters that are less important because they're not there in the other versions of it.
Which is inconsistent as far as number agreement is concerned. If one translates Kemet as Egyptians rather than Egypt, the plural agreement of the phrase Tepiu is consistent with that of Kemet as a plural noun.
So let's put it right next to each other. So you see there, right at the bottom, there's like a face. It sort of looks like a duck's head, but it's actually a face, a square, and the bird. So basically, that means Tepi, the face and the square, is Tepi, which on its own means one who is first. So that would be individual. With the bird, that makes it plural, which is what he's trying to say. So I understand his point when he's saying Tepiu would make it plural. An example of this is to use the phrase tepita. So here it's tepiuta, but tepita would mean a survivor, one person. Tepiuta could mean survivors.
This interpretation is consistent with that of other lacunary versions of the spell.
Lacunary, a word that I have never even heard of before. I just Googled it. It means uh gaps or openings. So you can see there that he's talking about that, just so that we can make sure we're not getting lost in the linguistics.
Whose reconstructions appear to have meant to be read Haka-in at Kim-u Tepiu Ta. In this case, the reference to Egyptians rather than to Egypt is more explicit.
Okay, so it was important that I point out that spaces thing. So unless I don't understand what he's saying, what he's basically trying to say is that in the spaces in the other ones, the word would be kemu rather than kemet. Now, of course, the problem with this is the fact that we already have kemet given to us as an example. So saying that in the other spaces in the gaps, there would be Camus there, that doesn't necessarily make sense if it's a retranslation of the original. The other ones are scratched out, but the original one is visible. But I think it can be correct without even making it Camus, instead, just making it Kemet, meaning Egyptians, plural.
It says, since the word for Egyptians, Kemu, is directly derived from the root Kim rather than from the word Kemet, that the plural of the word is marked by the more unambiguous plural marker, U, or W, I should say. It says, and that the word's reference to humans is expressed by the classifier.
So what he is saying might be true in the areas where there's nothing, right? Where there's those gaps. But in the first column, it's not correct, because there's like an emphasis here that they're talking about land. The bottom one that you can see there, that means that's a marker meaning land. So the chem and the T there meaning Kemet, plus that means absolutely they're talking about land.
If these reconstructions and translations are correct, one would have another instance of the word him, Egyptian, and thus a further plausibility of the etymological meaning of Kemet as the black ones.
Okay, so it puts it back together with the black ones because, of course, if Kemet uh, can mean Egyptians without just being Kemu, and it can mean Egyptians by Kemet, then obviously the Kem is related to being black. So I think that's what he's trying to get at, which I think is something that's already provable if you watch my first video.
Now, this is crazy here, so I will hear from you. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, so I agree with half of it, and I'm not seeing the second half. So basically, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at a few different versions. So these are all ancient versions of the same text, but you can see they're all written a little differently. And of course, because we're dealing with evidence that's thousands of years old, not all of it survives. So that's why you have some of it fragmentary. What's interesting here, and you also see that there's some differences. I'm sure you can recognize, here we have Tepiu Ah with then a seated man, a kind of member of the honored dead. So this is in the second. Sorry, I'm not sure. I realize that you can't see my mouse, but this is the second column from your left. So,
okay, you see my mouse?
yes, I can. Yours is the blue
down
dot,
here
right?
when you say Tepi Ta.
Yeah, so Tepe Utah, so that's one version. But then if you go to your left 2 columns, yeah, right there. So there you also see Tepe Ah, not Tepe Utah. So with the iron arm, and then with a kind of seated mummified person.
So this is the interesting part because Tepiu Ah with that seated man over there means those who came first. And if you remember, one of my interpretations that I gave of Tepi is first, those who were first on earth.
As a classifier. And then compare this with the very first version on your left, which is just Tepe Utah, where there's clearly no people being meant. There's no human classifier. It's just the word for land. So that's kind of that. So we're looking at not only one version, but we're looking at kind of the Egyptians themselves are trying to say, okay, well, what was this actually saying? And they're coming up with a few different versions of what they think that this text is trying to say or what they want it to say.
Which is why, by the way, we invented the alphabet so that it's not as interpretation based as these type of character based languages that again rely on puns and rely on all of that. And so you can see there, even if there's a land marker, like a marker that says we're talking about land here, because of the pun, it's possible that they're not necessarily speaking about land. And that's why they translate it a little bit differently. This is the problem. But if you get back to writing in alphabet as the ancient Egyptians invented, then you can just thus the it is it, people are people, that is that. Which, by the way, does add validity to Smash Rockwell's point that it could be different in the third one, because if we already have a difference on the second one, there might not be writing the same thing over and over again, but rather giving a different interpretation each time.
Now, what I do now, this is also from a coffin text, and the coffin text, like the pyramid text before them, are very unique in the way that they're writing the Medu Neter. So what they like to do, for example, they like to drop any weak consonants. And sometimes they like to write only the bare minimum number of glyphs that are required.
And of course, this probably makes it look cleaner, but at the same time, it means if tradition changes. Remember, I said that Egyptian is not writing first, it's speaking first. And so, because they understand each other, it's like writing music. It took forever for human beings to figure out how to write music. Whether you were Africa, India, Europe, or Native America, there was some system for writing music. But these systems didn't work because you had to first understand the music before you could read the music, unlike later versions of writing music. And like here, you have to understand what they're talking about before you look at it. And so if you start removing certain characters, you start getting into a little bit of a jam later when the tradition has changed.
And so based on that, and if we take kind of the version to the far left as kind of the simplest, I do agree with this author's statement that we should be understanding this as you ruled the Egyptians, Kemet to you, rather than Kemet. So again, restoring the yod and the W after the T as weak consonants, those who are on the earth. So basically just saying you ruled the people of Kemet, those who are on the earth. So that I see very clearly, and that I do agree with the author there.
It definitely makes way more sense because it does have the plural terms. So it would be very difficult to say you ruled Egypt and then all of a sudden there's a plural with those on the earth, those people who are on the earth. Meanwhile, you're talking about um multiple people, but we'll get back to that.
Where I am more hesitant to follow the author is when they then turn to say, this is consistent with the other lacunary versions of the spell, whose reconstruction appears to have meant to be read as Heka en ek Kemu Tepiuta. Because I don't see any examples here where that T is not preserved for us.
I'm sorry. You mean the Kemet T?
Yeah,
Right here?
so I see the Kemetiu, but I don't see any versions of Kemu. So where
Okay,
the
so
T
I
is,
think I want to explain something that I probably should have gave you. The star here, and it goes back to footnote number 7, where he argued that Kurt Self argued that this K and this M, he argued that what was missing here was the Uchik. So you see the Uchik here with a man, and then we see the Uchik here. So it could be argued that it is a complete Kemet here, but then there's not enough space for the reed leaf and the Uchik to make that be a commit to you. So I think the argument is based on what is stated by this reconstructance that there is a Uchik here. You see what I'm saying?
I should have noticed the star in the beginning with the other side. So basically, he's saying in that specific location, the word Kemu would be in that region. And I did say that earlier.
I see what you're saying, but again, and this is now speculation because this is lost, but I would not also because every other version that we have that does preserve the word preserves a T here, I would say that there's enough room for a quail chick and a T.
Okay.
Because a lot of times you could have the chick kind of like, because the chick has a natural kind of like slant to it, so it's really easy to squeeze that T, that half kind of bread loaf in like above its back, so it can still fit within kind of one square or rectangular portion. Of course, now I'm speculating here.
No,
This is
that's
just my
fine.
best
We've
guess. Yeah,
all speculated. That's perfectly fine.
yeah.
But in
Though
that
it's,
hypothesis,
mhm.
you say they omitted the reed leaf just because Kemet U is a construct we really never find.
I think we do find it, again, because the reed leaf as a weak consonant and the W as a weak consonant are likely to be dropped in certain religious texts.
So I have very little to add here. I think both interpretations make sense. Obviously, there's a gap there. So what can you do but guess what the people said unless we can find a time when it was not removed? Now, I have no idea where that's from. So I have no idea exactly what is being said, but um I think both interpretations are fine for now. And the fact that you can have one interpretation like that tells you, I don't think it's completely out, and I don't even think that you would not find it somewhere else. I think this is just one of the places that you could find it.
I never found because my lack of my limited research. I apologize. I don't know what you got. You probably with a KMT without the reed leaf and an uchit. I couldn't. You know where I could find that at.
I don't have the reference. I don't have a reference offhand, but I could say that it would not be. I don't think it would be particularly weird.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's interesting, and that shares a lot of light on some of the things. And so we're 30 minutes in.
Can we go back for 1 second? I had
Yes,
more to
sir.
say about the other versions.
Okay.
So notice, so that's just the first version. That's or the first and last version. So the version on the left and the version on the right, and then some of the versions in the middle as well, where they say, "You ruled the Kemetiu, those who are on the earth." It's interesting though that the other versions, for example, specifically the second and the third one, kind of play with this. Well, the third one says the Kemetiu, those who are on Earth. But the second version, then whatever it's was it said, whether it says Kemu or Kemiu or Kemetiu, who knows? But then the phrase after it, Tepiu ah, not Tepiu ta, but Tepiu ah. This is a word for ancestors. So I, like you having ruled the Kemetiu or the Kemiu, the ancestral ones. So there we see a variation. And so I'm not sure if it's kind of important to your research, but I did want to point it out because
that's very important. Now, I start.
Well, the reason why it should be very important to his research is because um he's giving, well, he's basically trying to help him out, giving him a thing showing that there is a variation already where the T is dropped. And so even though there is a T in the letter in the previous one, they're reinterpreting it without the T. So in other words, even though the T is there, it might be possible that even though it is there, it's not supposed to be there. And if you're interpreting it that way, starting from this point of view, then it lifts the possibility that the T in Kemet could also be lifted in the same way that it's lifted in that final statement. I think that's what he's trying to hint at, saying that maybe you've got a point in that sense.
Fumbled on that Tepiu for a minute. I couldn't find examples of it in other places.
Yeah, it's a word for ancestors, essentially, or like primordial forefathers.
So like At are at the root of Atef, like fathers, or Atef?
No, it's different. It literally means like those who are first of action or those who are first of occasion, something like that. It's a totally different root.
So again, what he's trying to get at is the pun part of it that is being made here, which is even though from a linguistic point of view, tepi, which means the ones on top of, but can also mean tepiu, which can mean the ancestors. It's possible that what's really happening is, even though it's written one way, in a pun sort of way, because the word tepi, can also mean the first. And so they're using it like, oh, maybe they're not saying on top of the earth, but rather saying the first. And that even though you're supposed to say that, it's like saying that, no, actually, this is the real interpretation.
And it's also one of these words where, like, in order to find it in the dictionary, like sometimes you have to look under tep, sometimes you have to look under
that's what I'm. So it's kind of like a phrase in a way, like Tepiu ah.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. And so yeah, well, I don't have much to say about that. I don't have any disagreements. I see how you see these things, and that you're saying that there could be space here for what.
Here, I'm gonna draw a little diagram for you, or a little mock hieroglyph of how I think there could have been space.
Yeah, word up.
So something like this, where you have
So I'm going to.
So basically, I don't know why they're moving on immediately, because I think this is the very interesting part. The fact that Tepi Ta, for land Ta, is being interpreted slightly different, and the fact that we have this, I think this is actually a very amazing part, and I'm glad that I saw this.
Stop sharing so we can see
Oh,
this.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So then, now if that's the case, if they wanted to write that, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they have just put a TU bird? If space was an issue, TU bird would have solved it.
They could have also put a TU bird instead of a quail chick. It could have just been a TU bird. That's another option.
So when I ask myself, then if I'm the artist then and I'm trying to say something and I'm pressed for space and I have a glyph that fits, then I need, and me trying to figure it out, I need a reason why he didn't use that. And you know what I'm saying? I'm saying in order to answer my own queries, I'm like, was he just like, no? And it's plenty of instances of that, you know what I'm saying? Where I'm like, why did he just omit it? We know about graphic transposition and everything. Most of the people who will follow this video, if I get to release it, they will possibly know what we're talking about too. We have a small audience of somewhat novice grammarians who really love your field of work. And so your opinion is going to be, trust me, people are going to say, the Egyptologist said, that's what I'm going to hear a whole lot of, you know what I mean? And
Well,
so,
so it's interesting because especially as someone, so I work.
So it's an interesting discussion, and I think that the Egyptologist did provide enough evidence to say that there is at least room for doubt that the word goes specifically that way. But yes, there is a lot of interpretation, one way or the other, that we can do. So let me see if they're going to get to other examples.
With like the main focus of my research lately has been religious texts of the New Kingdom that are written in a ornamentally, sometimes called cryptographic or enigmatic script. So this is the questions that you're asking about, like, why did they not choose to write it this way, or why did they choose to write it that way? I'm asking a lot of these same questions, and a lot of times it almost looks like they are celebrating the diversity of the available writings that they have.
Which is a nice way of saying they are deliberately complicating their own writing script in order to show off to one another, and probably show off to anybody who's a novice, which really hurts from my point of view, because I make a, by the way, anybody who is watching this, don't take everything that I'm saying as gospel, because I make a lot of mistakes when it comes to the script. It's very, very, very difficult. And sometimes you'll make very simple mistakes like maths. So don't take everything that I say like it's like religious gospel. Even the expert is saying that he can be wrong about this information.
So basically, in order to kind of show off their chops, like it's very common to even see things that are not written consistently within the same text. And that doesn't mean that there's an error or that they're like, sometimes it can be anything. It could be a conscious choice to kind of show off their scribal chops, to say like, look, here I know how to spell it one way, but here's another way. Like, look how knowledgeable of a scribe I am. Sometimes it could do with space concerns, or sometimes there's just no way to answer why they're choosing to do it one way and not another.
Another reason could be the lack of standardization. So obviously, if you don't standardize everything, then, for example, right, I gave you some examples with the word right and the word right, right? We standardize alphabets so that RIGHT is right, but then you can also write it as RITE if you would like. And standardization has made it so that we only have one variation, one interpretation that is considered correct. But if you think about it, you can write English however you want. You can write English completely different. You can write correct as KUROKT, correct. You can if you really want to. And to some degree, that would be showing off your skills, but to some degree, you're just overcomplicating a language. So that's why I'm saying that to some degree, it's they just needed more standardization and lack of showing off.
Thank you for that answer. So I just got these up here for the fun of it because some confusion about the 049 town determinative. It doesn't appear to be confusing to me when I do look over various texts of how it's used. And I'm trying my hardest to find another term where they strictly and specifically attach 049 to the root and say that it means land. In most instances, it means a town, a city situation, or something like that. But when we translate Kemet, it supposedly translates back to the black land.
So it's true what he's saying that 99% of the time, whenever you see this symbol, it usually refers to a city and not in a vague way, in a very real way. Now, I'll get back to Upper Egypt, but let's go look at the other ones. So you can see with Abydos as well, and you can see with a more direct one saying my town. This one is probably the best one. So the word does to some degree mean city, but of course, what does city mean? And you can see it here being used in Heliopolis, again, meaning it's right there. The, I don't want to say land determiner, but let's say what he said, city or something like that. Now, there are two that are a little bit confusing, which is when it's used for Tawi or the two lands, right here, Lord of the two lands. Now, I mean, they're definitely not cities. Now, you could say they're nations. You could say that. And you could say this means an area where there's a populace, a people. But for me, this is always the interesting one when it's used for the underworld. Now, is the underworld a nation? Is it the nation of the people in the underworld? Is it a city? Is it a populace? Is that how we should look at it? Or should we look at it like a different way where we're looking at it like it's literally talking about area or maybe even land? If we look at this one, we can actually see that they use these sort of differently but similar. So we can see there one who does excellent works for the Lord of the Two Lands in brackets. And then it says at the bottom, opener of the two lands. And you can see that the dot, the line with the three dots, meaning land, is there. The unification of the two lands. So the line with the two dots is there as well, obviously showing two of them because it's two lands. Uniting of the two lands, the line with the three dots at the bottom. Balance of the two lands. You will notice here that nothing special has really happened at this point, but yet you have the determinative right there. And just like the other one, uniting the two lands, and it definitely means those that one line with the three dots, which there's two of them, meaning there's two lands, they definitely mean land. And you will notice that the sentences, when you go to the next one, where that circle with the crosses there, balance of the two lands. Nothing exceptional has happened that would make you believe that now they're talking about a city as opposed to land in the same way that they were talking about before, except if you believe that that marker means city. And you could say balance might mean balance of the people, but clearly it means of the lands, which probably means the border, right? Which would be the border of the ground, the actual land. And you can see that they talk about the land if you keep looking at the other ones as well. Now, if we continue, it doesn't give us any indicator of a city going forward where it says the primeval gods of the two lands, two lands, two lands. So again, I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying that there is enough for some people to say that maybe the word doesn't necessarily always mean city, and that it is tied to city as a differentiator when you are using the other ones as well, or trying to be specific. But my other warning is that these words aren't as solid as we think, because obviously the one we read previously we could see as saying Egyptians, even though it's got the marker of land or city. So I'm talking about this one, the Kemet sign there. Clearly it means the Egyptians, but not always does it mean the Egyptians in the same way that it means here specifically.
Now, in Jesheret, we have this Kasat determinative, which would be indicative of, foreign countries, hill country, and they use it for desertous area, which we also have here translated back as land. Do you know what I'm missing about this 049 glyph and how in this word Kemet is translated to just mean land?
Yeah, so again, so one thing that I will say first, I hope you'll be excited that I can provide other examples of, regions that are given the city determinative.
Okay.
So especially when they say Ta Mehu, the land of Lower Egypt, or Shemau, Upper Egypt, a lot of times they'll give those city determinatives. Not always.
No, I'm with you.
But sometimes.
So I'll give my opinion of what they mean by this. Possibly could mean, obviously could mean anything, any of the three that have been already thrown out there, but I have to first wait for them to give their opinions, and then I'll throw in why I think this exists in some cases when they say land and not others.
I'm with you on those, but that appears unfair because they literally say land there. Ta.
Sometimes, but not always. So sometimes it's Ta Mehu, sometimes it's just Mehu, sometimes it's Ta Shemau, sometimes it's just Shemau.
I'm with that.
Yeah.
And even when we see Shemau, we know they talk about Ta Shemau. And Mehu, we know they talk about Ta Mehu. And so the Ta is omitted.
Yeah, but again, going back to now your question about whether we should translate Kemet as the land of Egypt, you're quite correct here in saying that there's nothing clearly in this word or in kind of attestations of this word to say the land of versus Egypt.
So this is not to argue with both of them, because I think they have more information than I do. But it's very rare in history, just any language, pick any language and go check, for a land, a specific land, or a specific, it's hard to even say it with words. It's hard for a specific country to be named a country. And when you say the country's name, you don't think of the land in specific, or the land in specific. For example, if I say Tokyo, Rome, China, South Africa, am I speaking about land or am I speaking about people? And even for Egypt, but we saw in the first example that we saw that even though the word can be given with the so-called city or town determinative, we can still make it mean the people. So people of Egypt. So let me give an alternative here. So the one who does excellent works, opener of the two lands, so you can see there are two lands, the unification of the two lands. You see, two lands, or of two lands, uniting of two lands, of the two lands, and then balance of the two lands. And then you notice here where suddenly that marker is back. And I think the reason, a possible reason, is because it's there when they're speaking about a specific place with a name or a, so like the duat, the underworld. It's not a random place. It's a place that has a specificness to it, just like Egypt or any city has a specificness. But when they say desert, they just mean in general. So anything that's general, you don't give it this, but then when you go specific, you give it the signifier. This would be consistent with a lot of the examples that I've given. But again, I don't know. Balance of the two lands, the primeval god of the two lands, two lands, two lands. I just thought about it. A cleaner way of saying that is it's a marker for a proper noun. I think that's another way of saying it as it pertains to a specific piece of land.
What this literally says is that which is black. Like the abstract black thing. And then from there, people have added their own flair and nuance in translations, possibly. And again, maybe this is where maybe where your research is getting at something, but possibly in an inconsistent way with other geographic terms.
Very much so. Now, when the scholars and they've all came to a consensus of somewhat what you told me, then the question is, what is which black? You know what I'm saying? And it comes down to, again, the people of the story. So I'm going to leave the people thinking along a bit and try to see what scholars leaned on besides secondary sources to come to the conclusion that the blackness that this referred to was the Nile silt.
So, of course, this is a very interesting question. And the answer is there is no information that will tell you that that word specifically refers to the black part of the Nile and of the Nile banks or whatever. But of course, this is speculation in either direction, because how are you actually going to get that information? From a sort of obvious perspective, if it means population, in the same way that the word nation means population first, then 100% it's referring to the blackness of the people rather than the land. But to me, this doesn't mean that they wouldn't then take that same comparison and then compare it to other things that are black, as they do several times.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the, unfortunately, I think one of the major conclusions or one of the major influences here is there is a racist element, certainly in the history of scholarship. But
by the way, this thing that he's saying, that there is a racist history in Egyptology and in history in general, is something that is accepted by most Egyptologists of most countries except for one. You can guess which one claims that there is no racism in Egyptology. You can guess which country it is. Now, with everything I've said, I just want to state one thing. With the comparison of the earlier Kemet to the land and Kemet to the people, which you used grammar to get to that conclusion, I think without a doubt, the ancient Egyptians called themselves black using this word, maybe not this exact interpretation on the top here, but they did definitely use this word, which can be interchangeable with Egypt, the country, to mean themselves as black people. But I think that that would only be accepted had there not been the bias in the beginning to sort of like try your best to go against it. There's almost no way that I could see them not using this word to mean black Egyptians. Why would they pick this word? They didn't have to.
Two, I think there's nothing that I know of necessarily. Like, there's no one text that I can point you to. And again, this is not my area of expertise, so maybe I'm missing something here, but there's not one text that I can point you to that specifically says, by Kemet, we mean the black silt, and specifically silt, and the land as opposed to people.
That definitely doesn't exist, which is why it's sometimes, puzzling why, first and foremost, they always say that it 100% means that area and it never means the people ever, ever, ever. Now, of course, the other way is true as well. Like, we can't find a thing that says it's 100% saying the people and not referring to the land, but, you know.
But what I think is more convincing to me is the contrast that is drawn between Kemet and Deshret. So these terms are often contrast together, where you can see then, Deshret, clearly it means red. It's given a foreign land determinative contrasted with Kemet. We know, for example, that, a lot of like funerary figures are depicted with black skin. Again, and they're depicted with black skin in some cases, green skin with other cases, Mediterranean olive skin in other cases, brown skin in other cases, kind of like every color under the sun. So that it does maybe there, Kemet here might speak to something specifically identified with the Nile Valley or the area around the Nile, where we know that most Egyptian cities were, as opposed to something foreign.
So this is what I was talking about when I was talking about the all or nothing theory, which I think is a weak one, because if you do all or nothing, then you're going to be battling forever, because there definitely is this contrast between the Deshret and Kemet. Now, you could say maybe there's some misinterpretation or whatever, but we do know what Desher means. And Deshret, of course, means the red lands, right? As opposed to deserted lands or whatever, but red lands versus the black lands. And it says there, wait, before I read, and of course, Smash Rockwell already provided for us the fact that it is shown with the land sign or foreign land sign, which I could look for too, but so we know that in the case of the Deshret, they're talking about land specifically. And you can see there it's written, and he ruled the banks of Horus, the black land and the red land were under his dominion. You can see that I'm reading at the last sentence. We can read the next few sentences. He wouldn't come at all. Similarly, if he prayed to any goddess, she wouldn't come at all. Their hearts were weak in their bodies. They destroyed what had been built. After some days had passed after this, his majesty appeared on the throne of his father, and he ruled the banks of Horus, the black land and the red land were under his domain. And in another stele, we can see here, it's in the 5th line, but I will read the whole thing in order so that we can get a full context. It says, "My majesty hunted them, a herd of 120. Never had anything similar been done by a king, since the god of those who had received the white crown. I have said this without boasting and without lie. I did this according to what was ordered to me. Who guides my majesty on the good road through his excellent plans? He united for me the black land and the red land. what the sun revolves around is in my grasp. Now I'll speak again to you, so hear, people. He conferred on me the foreign lands of retinue during the first expedition, as they came to engage my majesty, being millions of men, hundreds of thousands of the finest of all foreign lands, standing on their chariots, blah, 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 blah. So you can see here that clearly there is a separation between black land and red land, which would make us believe that the word Kemet can, and in some cases does, mean black land. But again, this is where I want to make the full thing, the assumption that I made last time. If it's a winner takes all type of thing, this is a sort of insurmountable thing. There's many more examples that I can find of this because it's easy to find. It's actually in steles, because they're victory steles. They talk about the red land and the black land a lot. The Tale of Senewi talks about the red land and the black land as well, in the same way where they're literally like, it's obvious that they're talking about land. Now again, it never says we are, this word means land, the black land only, and can never mean black people. That's the jump that a lot of other people start to make for no reason. And of course, as you can see with the word Kemet, choosing it for that word, the black part is important. So then when they say Kemet with the people as well, the black part is presumably important.
So I think that's where the assumption comes from, that this must be referring to something like alluvial silt. But in my mind, or at least my understanding, this is a leap in logic, that there is not a clear, absolutely conclusive statement that then we can say, oh yes, by Kemet, they simply meant the black alluvial soil, as opposed to anything else.
Thank you for that. I know you've done Luxor, the F.
I think personally it's undeniable that in this place where he says, and he ruled the banks of Horus, the black land and the red land were under his domain, and every land was bowing. I think it's very hard to, get away from that. By the way, I want to show that when he says, and every land is bowing, that they actually do write this. So look at the last line. Make sure you look at the last line. That's the one I'm reading. And every land was bowing to his might. So it's Ta Nub or Taneb M Kesu. That's how they would say it in the modern Egyptian way. Ta means land. Neb means every. Context wise, if we read it again, and he ruled the banks of Horus, already we've got an indication that he's talking about land. The black land and the red land were under his dominion, and every land was bowing. Taneb. Okay, so we're going to end here. And by the way, feel free in the comments to point out when I'm incorrect about my translations. I actually watched the first one I made, and I made the mistake when I was pointing out the land symbol, and I said the semicircle was the land symbol when I really meant the circle with the cross thing. But, I can't fix that now. But please point it out for me so that I can not make those mistakes again. Of course, when we're doing ancient linguistics, sometimes we get carried away with some of the stuff we say. So please point it out. Make sure I'm not making any real mistakes. I do look at the comments, I promise. Make sure you go in there and tell me where you think I'm making a mistake. And by the way, this is the last thing I'm going to say. Please do not get obsessed with the idea that for one thing to exist, another must disappear. That's just not how things work in real life.